Hello, everyone. It's great to see so many people here. We've got majors, minors, people who are just checking us out, which is awesome. We're going to start with our faculty members introducing themselves so you can just, put names and faces together. And Professor Newsel has to leave for his class, so he can go first.
Hi.
And what classes do you teach?
Right now, ethics and environmental communication and 111 and the other classes, 330 and all the other stuff.
Thank you.
I had at least two of these youngsters, well, they're not that young anymore. At one time, they were youngsters just like everybody else in the room. Eager, anxious to learn, and now look at them. Successful, rich.
Yeah. Donors. Thank you. Professor Sauter.
I'm Kevin Sauter, and I teach 111, 112, as everybody else in our department does for the most part. I also teach a persuasion class in the fall, so any of you are interested, I think you'd enjoy that. I teach television criticism in the spring, and if you haven't fulfilled your fine arts requirement, I also teach film, introduction to film studies, so you're welcome to take that class. So I'm glad you all came. This is one of my favorite events. It's always fun to see our alums come back.
Yeah.
And success. So this is a great opportunity for you to hear what their pathway was, and hopefully you'll get there yourself.
Excellent. Professor Armada.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ramada. I teach COJO 111 and 112 and the ethics capstone. All right, this is Rocky. A little big outside the room. And rhetorical criticism and argumentation.
And what are you teaching next January term?
Yes, Dr. Peters and I are teaching J-term in Hawaii.
Do you take alumni?
Intercultural communication.
Are alumni eligible? Can I come?
Priority registration deadline is April 10th, so snag a spot.
This Thursday is the Study Abroad Fair over in Anderson Student Center, so you can come over and chat with us then. Brittany was a student in the class a few years ago, so you can chat with her afterwards. She can tell you all about the class. Yep. Professor Vandegraaff.
Hello, welcome back, Bjorn. Great to see you. I teach 111 and 112, and I teach the supporting classes 251 and 451 and advise.
Excellent. Have I forgotten anyone? Okay. I'm Professor Peterson, and I'm currently teaching rhetorical criticism, communication of race, class, gender. Professor Armada and I will be teaching intercultural communication in Hawaii next January term. Love to have some of you come with us. It's not an extra class. It counts as intercultural communication, right? So you could take it here on campus, which is great. And you could also take it in Hawaii, which is really great. So, think about it, right? And again, we can tell you more about it at the Study Abroad Fair, or let us know, or talk to Brittany and she can tell you about it from a student perspective. Great. So our format tonight is that we have questions for each of our 5 alumni, and we're very pleased to have them here. And then we'll open it up to question and answer. So you might want to have something out where you can jot down some questions for our speakers, right? That would be maybe something you want to do. Yep. And we're going to start by having them just tell you who they are and what year they graduated. We'll start with Ashlyn.
I'm Ashlyn Kadafani, and I graduated in 2015, and I work at Blue Zones. I am the business coordinator, and Blue Zones is a health and wellness company that started as actually my boss, Dan Buettner, wrote a book called The Blue Zones after traveling the world to find out the 5 places in the world where people live the longest. And he did a bunch of research, figured out the 9 things that these people have in common, and then turned it into a company where we take those 9 things and we try to help American communities implement these semi-permanent and permanent changes to their environment so that we can all live healthier, longer lives.
Hello, I am Brittany Chafee. I graduated in 2010, which was like almost a decade ago, which is terrifying. And I am the marketing manager at Lifetime Fitness.
I'm Kenzie James. I graduated in 2016, and I do digital marketing for Cambria. So if you guys have seen like the countertops and teas, that's our product.
I'm Bjorn. I graduated 4 years ago, 2015. I work at Fox 9. I'm a morning news producer. So every morning I do 1 hour. I'm in charge of 1 hour of our morning news. That starts at like 4:30 to 9, and then sometimes I fill in on The Buzz or The Jason Show later on in the morning.
Hi, everybody. My name is Amanda Post. I graduated May 2018, so not even a year ago yet, but it feels like a long time and not a lot of time in the same. I am a senior research analyst for the Lewin Group, which is a health policy consulting firm. We do a lot of qualitative and quantitative data analytics to inform health policy.
Start telling us just a bit more about your employer and your position and how you ended up there.
So I'll start with the last question first, if that's all right, kind of how I got to where I am. So I found out I officially declared a COJO major my sophomore year and really kind of started thinking about what I would want to use a communication degree in. And in my interpersonal communication class, actually got onto this idea of health communication and what that would look like. And I kind of thought it would be cool to think about like how doctors and patients talk to each other and how that's important and what like a communication education can inform in that field. And so I did in the next semester in my research methods class, the communication inquiry class, I actually did a semester-long research study on healthcare communication topics, specifically in the overall satisfaction of empathy and the role that it plays in patient-physician communication. Presented that at the UCRC and just really found that there was so much in healthcare communication that it was actually a field that it actually existed, and was able to do a couple other things like through my coursework at St. Thomas and made a few connections with the Mayo Clinic and at the job fair. Just kind of started walking around and thinking about like what's out there, who would be united or who would be like someone I could get in touch with about healthcare. Ended up wandering over to the United Health Group booth at the job fair and handed them my resume, and they said, "Oh, you should talk to the Lewin Group." I had never heard of them. They said, "We do health policy consulting," and I said, no, thank you. That sounds terrible. But I went over to them and I just kind of talked to them, and they said, "It looks like you have research on your resume. Tell us a little bit about this." And so I was able to share about how in my classes I had learned about both qualitative and quantitative methods, mixed methods. If you've taken communication inquiry, you also have those skills. So keep that in mind. And they said, "We would love to have you on the team because you bring a perspective of qualitative communication," qualitative being like focus groups and interviews and things like that. And that is actually something that's really prevalent in the policy space that I work in now. So getting back to the first question, kind of what the Lewin Group does and how my education trained me for that, we do, it's called mixed methods evaluations. And so we have quantitative teams and qualitative teams that work together. Our quant team is made up of like economists and statisticians and actuaries, and they run a whole bunch of numbers. But then we also have qualitative teams, which are made up of people like me and social workers and political science majors and lots of people who have like their masters in public health or public policy, et cetera. And we get to go out to different hospitals and talk to orthopedic surgeons and nurses and like CEOs and CFOs of hospitals and just ask them to give us their story about how things work for them. And then we bring that back, put it together with our number people, and are able to deliver a really holistic and comprehensive view of our project to the client.
I'm just going to interject quickly. Amanda mentioned the UCRC. That is the Undergraduate Communication Research Conference. And some of you, have any of you presented at the conference? No one yet? It's coming up on April 26th, and it's held at the Anderson Student Center. There are faculty and students from across the upper Midwest who come and present their research in communication. Everything from mass communication to interpersonal rhetoric projects, video projects, and really think about that for the future. It's a great experience to share your research with other people, to have experience presenting in front of a group of people you don't know. It looks great on your resume, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Put it on your resume. Top research, bold.
Yeah, I've heard from a number of students that when they go to interviews, the person interviewing them will look at it and say, could you tell me more about this, right? And so you can, when you're doing a research project in a class, you can talk to your professor about it and ask if that seems like something that would be something you could submit to the conference. So it's too late, well, actually midnight tonight is when you have to submit for this year, but you can come to the conference this year. Go to the website and it will describe how, if you want to just come to a session or two so you can kind of get a sense of what the conference is, we'd really encourage you to do that. So again, that's on Friday, April 26th over in the Anderson Student Center. Yeah, thank you. Bjorn.
So I guess I'll start. I came into St. Thomas knowing I wanted to go down the journalism route and kind of stuck to that. Worked for Tommy Media. Do we have any TMers here? No one? Okay, that corner. Go apply if you haven't. I rose to the ranks kind of there, and after I graduated, got a job up in Duluth at the ABC station as a news producer. I did the 6 and 10 newscasts up there. Worked there for 2 years, and a position opened up down here at Fox 9. So I work on the morning news right now. I do, like I said, 1 hour each morning. Typically, my normal hour is I'm in charge of the 8 a.m. hour. So our morning news starts at like 4:30 in the Twin Cities, but then at 7 o'clock, the major networks turn over to GMA, NBC, The Today Show, CBS, but Fox is still local from 7 to 9, so I'm in charge of the 8 o'clock hour normally. So I kind of decide what stories to put in, the flow. I write most of my newscasts, unless it's a reporter out in the field, book guests, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Cool. So I started at Cambria actually as an intern. From there, I worked on our channel marketing team. So that is really just supporting like our business to business relationship. So we're a quartz manufacturer. So it's working with like designers, builders, remodelers. So that was always an interest of mine, is interior design. So it kind of was a cool way to get in. And then from there, I really kind of took a liking to the digital side of things. So this past summer, I started as a digital content specialist. So I basically own everything on our website. So I work really closely with our creative department and then every other department in marketing. So sports marketing, galleries, brand, events. And then I work really closely with our social media team. So if they post something on like Pinterest, they will lead it to a conversion page, and that would be something that I would build out. So really anything on our website goes through me. And then just sort of like a fun little tidbit is I started there as an intern, and now I actually manage our interns. So it's kind of like a cool full circle experience.
Okay, I have an interesting story because I actually graduated a little bit longer ago, but I graduated and I had a double major in advertising and communications. I wasn't COJO quite yet. And I got a job at Periscope, an ad agency downtown. They had just started a social media team. That's when I started. So I was on the social PR team, so it was kind of combined. And I hated it so much. I was on the account side. I'm a little bit more of a creative person, and I didn't really pay attention to that as much as I should have. And I was actually an account manager, and I just worked with clients and I didn't take a liking to it right away. So I panicked and I quit and became a flight attendant, which is an interesting path to take. But it was probably the best path I could have taken. I flew for about 2 years. I met Marty Davis and his colleague on the airplane at Cambria, and I started working there as a copywriter because I loved to write, and that's what I wanted to do. And I felt a little guilty pouring Cokes for people that I didn't know for 2 years, but it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. I would not do it. I met my fiance on the plane. I mean, it worked out for me. Got myself a man on the plane. So, and then after that, I was at Cambria. Yeah. Oh God, I'll get to that one. That's coming next, actually. And then I was at Cambria writing for all their content. And they owned Sun Country Airlines at the time. And they brought their marketing team and they worked with the same creative team in-house. So I started working with them and kind of reviving their social channels about, I guess it was like 6 years ago now. And eventually just kind of was birthed into that team. So I worked on the Sun Country team for a majority of my career until about 8 months ago. And I moved on to Lifetime Fitness. So at Sun Country, I kind of did the same thing. We had a very, very small team of marketers. We had an events person and like an assistant, and then there was me. So all the social content and communications and things like that kind of went through me. And then I decided to make a move just recently to go to Lifetime Fitness. I am on the fitness and nutrition's team for marketing. So I oversee all of the marketing and business strategy that goes through yoga, Pilates, group training. And I knew nothing about working out, so this was an interesting feat for me. But I love the health and wellness aspect of the job. It's a very, very cool company to work for. A lot of really healthy people that care about themselves, and that's a really good environment to be in for me. So yeah, I'm on the marketing team, but I work as a liaison between the creative team, so like designers and copywriters and project managers, and I worked with the project manager, and then I work with the business team, so they tell me what they need from a business standpoint. I flesh out the strategy and then talk to the creative team to kind of get it out into the world. So yeah, that's my story. Oh, and Mariucci. Since we had a small team at Sun Country, they needed a flight attendant, and I had the outfit, so I got in front of the camera, and I was on the screen for a little mini advertisement for Sun Country. And it was super embarrassing, but yeah. And there's me. Is she a flight attendant? Yeah. Yep.
And then I Googled her and saw that she worked for Sun Country. I'm like, yeah,
Oh gosh.
So I think from all of these stories, you can tell that a communication degree is really great because you can find what you're interested in and kind of take what you've learned and put it toward whatever you're interested in. So for some of us, that's health and wellness. For others, it's interior design. It's just you can take what you've learned here and make it anything. But when I graduated in 2015, I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. I started at a PPC advertising agency, which is pay-per-click Google AdWords. And I found it really limiting because you can only have 150 characters and it's really boring. It's a lot of data, and as helpful as it was to be in that sort of more corporate arena, it wasn't for me. And funny enough, in my ethics capstone, I heard about Blue Zones, and there was a job posting. So I applied. I took the job back in Wisconsin and was working for a couple months, and I got a call for that interview. 7 interviews later, and many hours in the car from Milwaukee to here, I got the job, moved back, and I've been there for 4 years now. It's a really small team, so in the office every day, it's about 4 of us. And so when I say the social media team, it's like me. And when I say the store manager, also me. And booking flights for people, me. So I wear a lot of hats and I do a lot of different things, but I also get to write for our website. I work with our web development team that kind of hosts the site, and I write articles. I work with our editor-in-chief, and we have some people that are all over the country, but in the office in Minneapolis, it's just 4 or 5 of us, and we get to work really closely with Dan Buettner, who's coming out with a cookbook this year, so that's exciting. And my name is in a book, which is kind of cool. So that's how I got where I am.
I'm sure there's no such thing as a typical day, but I'll ask it anyway. If you could describe to us what is a typical day, and including where do you work? What is your workplace?
So I work in the North Loop at a co-working space called Industrious, and it's really fun because we may only have 4 people in our office, but we get to see a lot of other smaller companies every single day. So I get to network, which is really important. I meet a lot of people, so even someday if I don't want to be at Blue Zones anymore, I have a whole office full of people who are doing cool things and that I get to meet every day. I take the bus downtown because Blue Zones reimburses for busing and active transportation. I usually check our social channels. I write emails. I'll usually pitch a couple articles every week, and then I build our newsletters that go out twice a week as well. And then anything from booking first-class travel for some of my colleagues to talking on the phone with somebody who purchased longevity tea and would like to know if it's compostable. So there really is no normal day for me.
Okay. A day in the life of me. I answer a lot of emails. That's like my main. I wish people would stop emailing me. I mean, that's honestly 70% of what I do in a day is answer emails. So I usually get to work. I work in Chanhassen, where the headquarters are, Lifetime's headquarters. And I live in St. Paul, so that builds character because it's a ways to drive. And so I answer emails in the morning. I should block off time in my calendar to not answer emails and do actual work, which my actual work is usually building a strategy for a campaign, meeting with business teams to see what their goals are. I write a lot of creative briefs, so once I talk to the business and figure out what their goals are and objectives, then I flush out a brief. And I write, what's the audience, what's the objective, what assets do they need? Do they need a social campaign? Do they need a digital signage? Do they need an email? And then after that, I will meet with every single team. So we have an email team, a social team, a web team, and I meet with them and we have a kickoff meeting, and then we kick off the campaign and have meetings we have different stages of the campaign that we meet with. And there's a lot of meetings too. Either answering emails or meeting with people and talking about the strategy, and then working with the project manager to get everything, all the tactics done on time. There's usually really tight timelines. And I guess that's kind of what I do in a day. I can't think of anything else right now because I'm just blanking out. But yeah, so if you have any questions for me after, you can definitely ask. It's just, I remember the first time I started at an ad agency, it took me an hour to write an email because it was kind of terrifying. But you'll get there, and it gets really easy, and you'll write one in like 5 minutes after once you've been at it for a while.
Yeah, so a lot of meetings, a lot of emails. I think probably across the board. You really do have to block off time to get stuff done, which usually gets booked up by a meeting. But so I work in Eden Prairie. That's where our sales and marketing office is. The cool thing on my team is we start off every day with what we call stand up. So it's pretty much like, here's what I'm working on. Here's my roadblockers. How can we help each other? So my digital team is myself, a front-end developer, an analytics guy, and then we have a project manager. So really like working through, hey, where do I need you to help me with coding? What kind of stats do we need you to pull, et cetera? And then really like Brittany was saying that she writes a lot of creative briefs. I review a lot of creative briefs. So I'm probably working on like 50 plus projects weekly. that usually don't get done for a few months because you have to start prioritizing what's gonna drive sales in a business. So really it's like updating content and then creating new and seeing what our return is on all of those things. I think that's kind of it.
So I probably have the weirdest schedule out of everyone up here. I go into work at 2 a.m. Yeah. I work in Eden Prairie. I live in Northeast, so it's about a 20-minute commute. Not too bad when you're driving in at 2 a.m. though. No traffic, especially on 35. Get into work, and I'm not the first one in there either. People get in before and after me. We usually have our morning meeting around 3:15 a.m. That's when we decide what our reporter is going to do, what are the big stories of the day. A lot of the stories we put our reporter on are kind of what's happening that day to fill in our viewers on maybe what's going on at the Capitol or previewing an event that's going on. Sometimes it's court cases, not too happy news. And then 4:30 rolls around, that's when our show gets on the road. Anchors usually show up, depends on what show they do, but 3:30ish. Show starts at 4:30. So after the morning meeting, I'm just plugging away, getting my show done kind of as fast as I can. Right is what I do like all morning. I kind of research stories too, see what the other networks are putting on, what the big national stories are, because I mix in national and local. We do put a big emphasis on local though, on our morning news. So 8 a.m. rolls around and I go in the booth. So that's where I am kind of in charge of the show at that point. Decide on the flow, make sure I talk with reporters out in the field, give cues to the weather guy to shut up when he's going too long. Yeah. Sometimes. I'll have to drop stories here and there, add in stories if it's breaking news. A lot of my job is troubleshooting during the show. If something goes wrong, it falls back on me. So I have to figure stuff out on the fly sometimes. It's definitely a unique job and keeps you on your toes each morning. Every day is a new day. Kind of you get to restart, refresh, and put on a new show.
Sounds so much more exciting than my job. So my job does not start at 2 a.m. I start my day
Lucky.
at like 7, I think, usually if I'm doing well. Day to day, a lot of what I do is similar to these 3 ladies. It's a lot of meetings and designing strategies about how we're going to tackle our problems. So consulting is really kind of it's a weird beast of its own. It's very fast paced, and your job is to figure out what the client wants and then figure out what their problems are and then solve them for them. So it's a lot of like back and forth with the client and thinking like what makes the most sense, how do we want to solve these problems, doing a lot of like team strategy, et cetera, et cetera. Me specifically, I being on the qualitative team, we're either like getting ready to go collect data, and when I say collect data, that's like doing the interviews and talking to people or designing a survey or whatever. Preparing to collect data, actually in the process of collecting data, which is like conducting the interviews or like synthesizing survey data, or analyzing the data, which is summarizing it, writing it, putting together reports and presentations. So specifically, I also do a lot of data visualization, which is kind of cool. So that is putting together like the most cohesive way to process like a lot of really dense information in a digestible way for the client and for an audience, just like anybody who's coming across to read something. So a lot of times what that looks like is our quantitative team will be like, hey, Amanda, we need you to come up with a way to visualize how to communicate that, like, I don't know, there's sicker patients in group B or whatever. And they'll like send me over a bunch of numbers, and then it's my job to think like, okay, what is the most important thing that these numbers are telling me, and how can I put it together in like a really, like, not super simple, but something that's a lot easier to understand than just raw data. And I got that job because we were sitting in a room and everybody was like, who has any design experience? And I raised my hand and said, I took one class. Thank you, Professor Keston. And they said, great, the job is yours. And then I really just had to kind of figure it out from there. But it's a really cool marriage between having like a critical thinking capacity and a creative thinking capacity. So they let me have a lot of fun and kind of how I design something. But it is like a really rigorous, intense training for me to even jump from a COJO degree to doing a lot of quantitative analysis.
Awesome. I'd like for each of you to share with these students some extra things that you did, whether it was internships or research projects, whatever, co-curricular activities that you think really were meaningful and that assisted you in getting a job, doing what you're doing today, anything along those lines. And Amanda, if you want to start.
The UCRC was definitely one of them. I did a lot. Let me back up 1 second. One of the things that I was told very early on at St. Thomas and really tried to stick to and benefited a lot from was people saying, just talk to people. Just say, like one of the phrases that I learned from one of my professors here was, so what's the landscape like? And I just asked that question in a lot of ways, like, so what's the healthcare communication landscape look like? Or tell me about like how your role fits into like the health communication landscape. And it's vague enough that they'll really just kind of tell you what they do. And you don't have to really know a lot. You just get to listen. And that helped me refine what was interesting and kind of what I wanted, and also gave me language for when I was interested in a company and I could like use language I had already learned to help me like refine and decide what was good. And then the last thing that I would add on to that is when putting together my resume, I went through the courses that I had taken and pulled out keywords or like key technical skills. For example, like mixed methods was one of them. And I'm sure all of you could speak to like hard skills that you learned in class that would be written down in those course descriptions that would be really, really beneficial to put on a resume.
I would say the most I learned from St. Thomas was through Tommy Media. I worked there for 3 years out of 4 here. And just from day one, I was learning skills that I still use today. I mean, how to write an email, writing an article, the basic news, how to put a news story together, how to put a video package together. I kind of rose through the ranks there. I started as a reporter, went to studio producer, and that's kind of where I loved putting shows together, bringing in guests, putting together, it wasn't live, but it was the closest thing we could get to a live broadcast here. That kind of stuff. I interned at a newspaper, the Southwest Journal in Minneapolis, and I also was at KARE 11 for a semester. Kind of learned how a newsroom works at KARE before eventually jumping to my first job up in Duluth.
So my first ever internship was through St. Thomas. So I actually was a graphic design intern for like all their internal, I guess, promotions. That was through going to South Africa. One of the gals on the trip actually was graduating, and she's like, hey, you should talk to Sarah, who was the head of it. And so it all just sort of like worked out. And I think that has been one of the greatest things, at least for my career, because I work so closely with like our creative department that I like have an understanding of what they have to do. And when we say, oh, please make these 17 changes, I know like how much time and all that goes into it. And it's just good to know like, the marketing side of things, but then also the creative side of things. So that's been really great. And then I also did an internship through Park Dental. So I did marketing for them. I applied what I learned from the St. Thomas graphic design internship to there. And then I also did like a lot of cool things on their website. So I think that just like sort of helped me down the path to where I am today on doing web design stuff.
I guess I have a lot of like random little things that helped me, like a list. I love lists. But in college, I was in NSAC, or National Student Advertising Competition. Do you still do that? Oh no. I was in that, and that actually, that extracurricular stuff that just shows that you care about what you want to do, is at the time when I was applying, it was very appealing for people. So I tried to be in everything, and community service was a big thing, and putting that stuff on your resume, because it feels like when I graduated, I was like, I don't have any experience. Like I have nothing to give you, but a college education, and that's hard because I mean you want to be able to speak to something, and that community service and things you're passionate about. If you like to write, if you like to do, paint. I mean, all of that stuff can be put on a resume because it shows you're passionate. And I think that's a big plus. As far as internships go, I would meet with anybody I wanted. I would ask them questions. I did informational interviews with anyone from an ad agency that I wanted to work at, and I would tour them, just reaching out to people, emailing them. If you want to email me, like, we'll go get a smoothie at the Life Cafe. It'll be great. But just getting to know people and having those conversations, because it helps you later. If you want to apply to that place, you have an email. I had like a little box full of business cards where I would just call them up, or email them. I wouldn't call them. But thank you cards are another thing. I love getting thank you cards from people that are in college. I think it's the sweetest, most detailed, generous thing you can do. I don't know. I love a handwritten note. What else? And even on your resume, when you're speaking, when you're starting a new job or interviewing for a new job, find something you're passionate about and speak to that really well when you're talking to them. I am a big storyteller. I love to write. In marketing, it's helpful to have a storyteller. You want to kind of build the value of a brand behind the stories and the things how they started or something, and that's usually pretty important for the people there too. So I found that storytelling background that I really, really love was something I could speak to in interviews. I think it might have gotten me my job that I have now. I recently wrote a book, and I think they saw that extra passionate side in something I really love that can be applied to my job now. So yeah, I think that's what I got for now. Oh, I get so dorky. I tell you, I get so dorky when I talk about this. It's a photography and poetry book. It's a coffee table book called Wild Morning. Me and another photographer went out and took pictures of women, which sounds weird now, just saying it, in the morning, and then I would interview them, and I would write about them. And it was actually, we came up with the idea when Prince died. I saw an old Rolling Stones article where he said, we know what it's like to be a man in this world, but do we really know what it's like to be a woman? And at the time, the photographer really liked the lighting in the morning and just the aspect of morning and being vulnerable. And I was like, oh my gosh, Dave, we have to go capture this story. At first, it was going to be an Instagram account, and then it turned into a book. And yeah, it was a really fun project. It was a really, really cool, different way to tell a story about a group of people. And I think that kind of aspect helped me in my career too, that passionate side.
I think something that's really important is making that human connection too. In an interview, if you connect with that person on a personal level, and that makes you more memorable. And even if you might not be the most qualified and you might not have everything on your resume, if you make a personal connection with someone, they'll remember you. I think part of the reason I got my job at Blue Zones is because I talked about podcasts with my interviewer for like an hour. This was at like cereal height. So we talked about cereal for at least 45 minutes. And we still, like, I sit next to her every day and we still talk about like, oh, what's the new podcast that you're listening to now? So that human connection really helps. If you can find something that person is interested, or through the course of the interview, if you're feeling like you can get to know each other a little bit more, that's really helpful. But I also did the UCRC. I studied this was after Dr. Peterson's race, class, and gender course, I studied the Native American name controversy with the Washington football team. After her class, I did an independent study and went to the protests that took place at the TCF Bank Stadium when the Vikings played the Washington team, and presented at the UCRC, which was a really valuable experience. Not only the research itself, which was hours and hours of interviews and reading and writing, but getting up and talking about what I'd spent hours and hours in my apartment alone doing. So standing up and being able to talk about what you've done is important.
Awesome, thanks. So current students often hear about the importance of networking, and they also hear about the importance of making connections with their professors. Could you speak to one or both of those? I'll let Ashlyn, you could start with that.
Funny enough, almost everyone in my office at some point has gone to St. Thomas. So Dr. Wyatt, who I don't know if she's still here, she was my capstone professor, and she brought up the Blue Zones job posting, and I think Blue Zones had only posted on like one college board, and it was St. Thomas because of the history with a lot of people coming here. And also just talking to students is important as well, because maybe they don't have the job that they want now, but in a couple of years that person might work for a really cool company, and if you stay in contact with each other, that's just another way to get your foot in the door somewhere.
Yeah, I think networking is probably the most important thing you can do. I mentioned it before, going to coffees with, or just going to the ad agencies or wherever you want to work and just reaching out to these people and having conversations with them is so important. And there were a lot of people that had graduated with before me that I had known that were working at agencies, and that would kind of help me out a little bit. Even one of my really good girlfriends, she was at Periscope at the time when I was trying to find a job, and she knew a bunch of people there, and I met with them for an informational interview, and there was a job opening, and she kind of joked during, I don't know why I remember this, but she kind of joked during it that she was like, about how much she loved cupcakes, and I remembered that, and I sent her one in a thank you card, and I sent her a cupcake, and she thought that, I don't know, she just thought that was a little unique, and we hit it off really well, but and I got the job. So I think the people here, and even in class, and being a part of like a club or something like an ad club or anything is so valuable, and it built a community for me here, and later down the road when we were all panicking and looking for jobs, it wasn't so scary, because we could talk to each other and kind of figure out how it could work for all of us.
Brittany, Professor Sauter, and I really like cupcakes.
Yeah. Yes. Now I'm starting something. And studying abroad was also awesome. And I studied abroad with Dr. Peterson in Hawaii, and it was amazing. And I met a lot of really amazing people on that trip, and we had a lot of really amazing experiences. And that was also a story I could tell in an interview later too. So I highly encourage you to do that.
I'll just piggyback off of that. I did study abroad twice, so with Dr. Sauter and then Professor Nugel. And I think it's just like one of those experiences that you'll always remember. And I think, at least for myself, those are the professors that I would still keep in contact with, just because you get to know them on more of like a personal level that way. And it's just such a great experience. And then just going to the whole networking thing. I don't know if you guys still do Take a Tommy to lunch, but it's like very nerve-wracking, but so great because it's like one more person that's already out in the workforce that you can connect with. And just in Minneapolis especially, everybody knows everybody. So even if you're talking to somebody at Cambria and you don't care about Cambria, but I might know somebody that works somewhere. Yeah, we did know each other. But I might know somebody somewhere else. Like a family that I used to nanny for, the dad reached out to me because I had a connection with somebody else within the Twin Cities. So it's just really important to network and make those connections, but also like don't burn bridges when you leave somewhere or anything, because someone's going to know you from something, and You just want to make sure that you're making the right connections and carrying a good name for yourself within the Twin Cities.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough about making connections, especially in the news business. That's it's like who you know. A lot of getting a job, especially in a bigger station or in a bigger market. My first job out of the gate, I knew 2 reporters who were working at the station I applied to, Briggs LaSavage and Heidi Engay, if anyone knows who they are. So they were able to put in a good word for me. They worked with me down here. They knew my work. And that probably was one of the main reasons why I got my first job, is because I knew a few people who worked there. And that was the same case when I came down here. I knew a anchor who came to be a producer at Fox, and I was like, "Do you have any openings down there?" Because my time was kind of up in Duluth. I was ready to move on, and she put in a good word. I talked with the news director a year before that too about an opening. Then didn't pan out, but a year later it was open, and I came down here. And I think that can apply to any job in the communications field. Just who you know, stay on good terms, stay connected.
I loved my COJO professors. I actually didn't diversify very much because I took a lot of the same professors. But in addition to really making connections with your professors, I also had some wonderful people step into my life just through some other connections at St. Thomas that really helped me. One that particularly comes to mind was my staff director on a vision trip that I went on. So have any of you been on a vision trip or like just got back from one? Oh, do vision, it's so good. But the staff faculty that lead those are actually from St. Thomas, and so we were able to build a really good connection in a little hotel in Guatemala. We became really great friends, and then came back. And when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and when I was really prepping for like these really intense interviews and writing cover letters and putting out applications, et cetera, I was able to go to her, and she would like do a mock interview with me, or she would say, "Oh, but like, remember that one time you did this? Like, you should really talk about that because that's really impressive." And so you just have these people who have a little bit of a broader scope than you do, helping you out and making you shine, and really just helping you be able to articulate your experiences and maybe catching things that you wouldn't catch on your own. And that just in and of itself is valuable in life. In a job, it's really important, and in just like navigating the undergrad to working to grad school to next job, et cetera, whatever maybe your path, having those people in your life are really, really valuable.
Wow. Awesome. We'll open it up to your questions. What would you like to ask this esteemed panel of graduates? A general question for all of them, or do you have a specific question that you would like to start with? Mackenzie, I know you have a question, I can tell. Yeah. Yes.
I found all of mine through St. Thomas. So the one here at Parkland LA and Cambria, a lot of places will post on certain colleges, and I feel like pretty much everyone goes to St. Thomas. So
I think I found my first one through the COJO website. They had internship listings. And then for Care 11, Professor Vandergriff works there. So that was one connection, again, a connection that can get you in the door. And I knew a few other people who had interned there before. So that was helpful.
Yeah, I found mine through the ad club. I think because we had people come in from other agencies and stuff. And I actually found my first internship was at Canterbury Park, and they posted it on the website too. So, yeah, it was the website.
I didn't really have an internship, but I was the communications person for the student affairs division last year, like my senior year. I did it with them.
If your professors recommend that you link to them on LinkedIn, I really encourage you to do that because then we can keep track of you for things like this, right? Oh, so-and-so's doing this, but also we get things across our desk that aren't posted anywhere. And if we know you and have had experience with you, it's like, oh, this seems like a really good fit for this person. So I encourage you, if your professor recommends that you do that. And I know Professor Sauter and I both do that. So if you know us, please link to us on LinkedIn.
I have a question for the group. Every one of you mentioned how much you write. And I'm wondering if you can link some of that back to your COJO class. One of our guiding principles is we want everybody to be able to write perfectly and speak effectively. And does that have some impact on you as you develop your writing skills?
I guess I'll start. In addition to all of the other things that I do, I also get to work with our legal team, and it's really important. Blue zones is a trademark term, but it's also just a generic term as well, so people can talk about the blue zones of the world. There are 5 of them, and so it's really important to differentiate when you use blue zones in the sense of like our company and our products, and when you're talking about blue zones as a geographic location. And we've actually had litigation with Chanel. They came out with a blue serum and talked about how it was from the blue zones, but we have trademarked that term, so they can't do that. So it's the nuances in language that are really important, and a lot of that comes from studying language and words so carefully. But I also think that images in addition to words are really important, and in the race, class, and gender course that I took with Dr. Peterson, that informed a lot of what I do today when I'm deciding what words go along with the images that I'm posting on Instagram or whatever, especially in the political climate that we're in. You have to be so careful and make sure that what you're saying and what you're showing the world is appropriate, and I have to analyze every single image, and sometimes I'll feel like our Instagram is looking a little too white, and I'll have to kind of make sure it's inclusive to everyone, because the blue zones are in Okinawa, Japan, and Sardinia, Italy, and Nicoya, Costa Rica, and everything that we say, I want it to be positive and inspiring. That's kind of our guiding principles. And it really is a lot of looking at every single word that you say. And I think that, and editing, Paul Clatta, that informs everything. I would say everybody take that class no matter what you do, because if you write an email and you make a mistake, you're gonna look, unprofessional. So that one was a really important course, and I learned so much.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, even theology, I thought, as far as writing goes, I think any good writer reads a lot. And I read a lot in college on theology, and I remember in Christian marriage, we wrote a 15 or 20 page research paper, and that surely helped me down the line, and especially all the reading. If you read all the time, you become a better writer. So even though those books can be expensive, they're worth it. And I actually I had a kind of, on the side, I wrote for this website called College Candy when I was in college. They didn't pay me, but I worked with it's just an online magazine, and I worked with the editor there and would pitch random pop culture articles and things like that. So I did that on the side. I think I would wake up at 6 a.m. and sit at my desk and then write a bunch and then go to class. And it was actually really fun. It was kind of an outsourced thing that I did, but and now I still write for I like to pitch articles and still do that, so on the side. But yeah.
Okay, so my example, I was actually just telling Brittany before. I don't remember what class it was, but it was one of Armada's classes, and I think it maybe was public speaking. Does he teach that? Okay. And one of the assignments was writing an email, and I spelt his name wrong, and I got docked 2 points. And so that's like one thing that I always remember is like when you're writing emails, read it over, even if it's like a 2-sentence email to someone. And I also think just from pretty much like every course, especially in COJO, you're used to writing like long papers, but I think it's really important when you're like out in the field to be able to zoom in and zoom out. So if I'm talking to my counterparts, I might get into the details a lot more, but if I'm talking to leadership, my email is going to be bullet points. Like they want a high level know what's going on. They don't need me to write them 2 paragraphs. Like they want to read the important stuff. So I think like really just from writing papers and screwing up on emails in my class, I'll always remember it.
Lesson learned. Yeah, I get to write every day, and I kind of get to flex my muscles in that capacity. Whether it's writing about what's going on in DC or the street parking here nightmare, or April the giraffe being pregnant again. Had that story this morning. Yeah, and it all goes back to what I learned here, especially in Vandy's reporting class, how to write a news story, get to the point, especially when I'm building a newscast, I'm going to allot 45 seconds for the story. I need to put a soundbite in here. I need to craft the story, get to the point, not dilly-dally around. Especially in the morning when you turn on the news, sometimes you don't want to see like a 7-minute piece. You want your news of the day and you want to get out and go. So kind of goes back to that, just basic accuracy, writing skills. I always comb through my scripts before I go on. Sometimes there'll still be a mistake, but it's on air. It's got to be as close to perfect as you can get.
My class that comes to mind is actually argumentation and advocacy with Dr. Armada, and I say that because it really taught me how to critically evaluate a written piece of work, and in turn craft it myself. You can ask him about our argumentation and advocacy platform one time. It was a really interesting topic, but it really taught me how to think very critically about just an opinion or an angle. And in argumentation and advocacy, you are given a side to argue, and you may or may not agree with that point of view, but you have to like craft a very well thought out argument and logically support your points. And a lot of what we do in consulting is providing a point of view to the client that is well thought out and logical and makes a lot of sense. So, and it's our job as independent evaluators not to provide opinions on things, but to just very like intelligently and thoroughly provide like a lay of the land, so to speak. So that really taught me how to think about how to write.